Well, the role I'd like to see local government play is sort of act as that liaison between the industries, the public, and other stakeholders in the city. For instance, it would be really important to make sure that the local government can serve as sort of that intermediary to convene people together, to have these conversations between the public, advocates, and the companies themselves, because we're all trying to figure out what's going on and how these emerging technologies are going to affect real life scenarios and real life situations. So, not everybody knows all the solutions, and so we feel that the public also has a lot of really important insight that will, in theory, make even companies' products better. But if there's no good way for the public to contribute, then they're not going to know about those things until we have problems, until we have it's going to require a major incident for them to fix those problems in the first place. Like, a lot of us could have, maybe foreseen what happened in Tempe, Arizona, for instance, and talked to the companies about that scenario before it happened. And so, I feel like that would be a really great place for local government to as well as incorporating feedback from the public as they create these policies that the companies, whether they have to comply to them or if it's a handshake agreement to apply to them, to make sure that the public is able to contribute to formulating those policies. Sure, I think there's a lot of low-tech solutions that would clearly benefit, create safety. I'm going to say bike lanes is one of the lowest tech solutions. It's literally just paint or concrete. But I think there's other lower tech solutions that the industry itself can make. For instance, having more feedback to drivers when they're, say, going over the speed limit, or maybe even having a speed limiter. I know that's a lot to ask, but I think that's a pretty low tech solution right now that we know we know exists and can increase safety to a high level. But I'll stick to some of the basics that have the tried and true. Is just making sure that our street designs function for those outside of motor vehicles.
Sure. So there are a ton of pressing needs. But one of the things that I feel like we can use most is data. And if you start, even just looking at the parking data, we can find out a ton of different things. Like, for example, when the parking authority started to remove paid parking by the Hill District, we started realizing that people were trying to get free parking outside of people's homes. So there's no real way for us to really capture that data without, sort of infringing on the rights and privacies of others. But, some people do indeed have that data, and we know where those vehicles are. So I feel like a pressing need is to just get access to more data for the public good. So as far as public engagement in data is concerned, I'm more of a user experience type of person. So essentially what I would like to see is, just really good uses of that public data, right? Because to be honest, I don't want to take other time and work outside of, my normal 9 to 5 in order to work for that to work with that public data. However, I do think that, for example, if we're able to say, where is available parking, then I think that that's the point where we can start engaging public data and using it for just general public good.
So some pressing needs I would like to see addressed with technology, especially related to autonomous vehicles, I think is the ability for people with disabilities to be able to travel spontaneously. One of the challenges that we currently have is, buses are generally accessible, but there's a fixed route. So sometimes it's hard to go places that you want to go, especially without taking a really long time, having to switch buses. Maybe the closest bus stop is a mile away from where you're trying to get to, those types of things. Or there's paratransit, which you have to schedule a day in advance. And so, if I'm sitting at home and think like, I want to go to a restaurant for a supper tonight, let me hop in my car and go. If you don't have your own personal vehicle that you can drive, potentially somebody that's blind that can't drive their own personal vehicle, they're kind of stuck with either public transportation, or paratransit, or ride sharing, potentially. So there's kind of a lack of options for some people with disabilities. Wheelchair users, if they don't have their own vehicle they can drive, it's basically paratransit or public transportation, because rideshare companies still don't have accessible vehicles, although there's been several lawsuits and some things like that going on related to that. I think getting the needs of people that the transportation solutions that are currently available aren't really a good solution, and autonomous vehicles could be a solution to help with that, as long as they're designed in the right way and the policies surrounding them are enabling. I know probably 7 years ago there was talk that in order to drive an autonomous vehicle you still had to have a driver's license, and so somebody that's blind wouldn't be able to use an autonomous vehicle. I think that's one of the areas I would like to see things addressed more. So an area where communication, I think, is lacking between government, industry, and universities, I think kind of in the same realm that I brought up with the last question, is when new and emerging technologies are coming out, to really think about how they are going to be implemented and who they are affecting that might not even be the people they were intended for. I'd mentioned the ride shares, Uber and Lyft. When they came out, it was great for a large percent of the population, that they could get a ride wherever they wanted. However, they basically said they didn't need to be accessible because they weren't a transportation company, they were an app company, and that they had less employees than what the Americans with Disability Act mandated. And so they basically, were trying to say we don't have to be accessible. There's taxis essentially for that, or public transportation. But they started putting taxi companies out of business because they were taking all of their other clients. So how that all worked is it basically took away a transportation option for people with disabilities like wheelchair users, rather than giving them another one. And similar, the e-scooters that are popping up in a lot of cities, great for somebody that lives a mile away from campus or where they work or something, to just hop on a scooter and go to work. But what generally happens is the scooters are just thrown on the sidewalks, where wheelchair users need to use the sidewalk to get to where they're trying to go. And so you probably see it around Pittsburgh. I've seen it in a lot of other cities I've traveled to, where I'll be going down the sidewalk trying to get somewhere, and all of a sudden the sidewalk is completely blocked with a scooter or two just thrown in the middle of the sidewalk. And so then I either have to run it over, push it out of the way, or, go around the block to try to find another way to get to where I'm going. So I think there's a lot of things that were done with good intentions, but the city and the industries maybe don't talk to the universities or talk to the community enough to really understand the whole ecosystem around it and how it's going to affect people that maybe it wasn't intended to affect.
Yeah, so great questions, and I think the issue is there needs to be a combination of what we call public-private partnership, but building trust is at the base of all of this. So how do you, what we do at Metro 21 and Traffic 21 and Carnegie Mellon is using technology as a tool to solve a real-world problem. And we in academia shouldn't be deciding what those problems are, but we should have that collaboration with the government entity and also with community. And I think that was a lesson learned that I experienced is even though you're collaborating with a municipality doesn't necessarily mean that you have the voice of the people. And so the role of community groups, the role of nonprofits can play that really important kind of neutral, trusted partner in that. And industry plays a role as well because of the use of new technology. So I think and then ultimately what you want to have is a pilot project that is time-bound, where you're co-creating at the design of the project, you're co-creating as it's being implemented, you're iterating, because there's always unknown unknowns when you're doing this stuff. And then at the end, you evaluate. And that's often kind of a dirty word in academia about evaluation, but you need to have that. And then the most important part of it is to ensure that it's being integrated and transferred and scaled to the entity. Typically, it's going to be a government entity is going to own that project and take it on. So, ensuring that transfer process is thoughtful and intentional, and that there's funding and staff to support it.
Yeah, I think a few pressing needs that I'm passionate about personally are just making it easier for people to get around in different modes, not having to rely on a car. So for me, I see a need with transit. I think public transit's just made it's too complicated these days, and having customer facing information as user friendly and in the ways that they're already getting their information about travel is something that I'd like to see. I think making these other modes as easy as possible, kind of meeting people with the information that they need to make those decisions where they're already at is something that I like to see. So I would definitely like to see more engagement with public data. I being kind of a data geek myself, I love to just see open data sets, and the more I think cities make their data more open and available to people, to their citizens, to developers, to companies to make use of, I think is a good thing overall to advance the industry. So I think just open portals for downloading different data sets, online dashboards that are intuitive and user-friendly to see what the city's doing, I think would be a cool thing to see. And I think just having that be more ingrained in our cultures of each of our organizations is kind of that openness and sharing of information and data, I think is going to bring this a long way.
Yeah, overall it would just be safety aspect, giving alert to the average person walking or biking or driving, alerts, weather alerts, communication, stuff that people can use tangibly. They're here today, where they can get the data and be able to make decisions on what kind of is it bad weather? What route to take? Where's there crashes or accidents, and what construction work and stuff like that. The safety at the intersection level, improve pedestrian safety, turning rate. Notice where areas of turning radius of trucks are at, issues, conflict points, stuff like that. But technology like that can be rolled out and to get the people in their personal devices they have and whatnot. Yeah, so I guess with low tech, you probably see it as more of a cheaper. That might be the hardest thing. Is a lot of these more expensive cars probably have a higher price point the average person cannot get attained to. So it's looking for something like where it's more low cost improvements, not necessarily low tech. Low tech and low cost, I guess, just go hand in hand. If something that were to get more than mass, because right now you're getting the smaller percentage are actually accessing this technology today. It'd be nice to have a higher rollout, wherever that would be. Wherever has the biggest bang for its buck, and it's more of the generic aspect of stuff. But looking for more bang in the buck, so more people roll out and whatnot.
So I think especially in the realm of mobility and emerging technology and transportation, there's a strong role of government in being able to effectively manage the public space. So that's everything from the pricing of and issuance of permits for operators to both operate in the public space and then for any fixtures that might be located on public streets or sidewalks, to things like making sure technology, to the extent we can, is deployed in an equitable fashion, and that if we, for instance, in Pittsburgh, are deploying a scooter fleet, that we're making it an objective of that program to also provide that as a mobility option to areas of the city which maybe have been underserved through other transportation means. So as a representative of local government, I like to bear in mind that we are here to support residents and to provide basic city service, a quality of life and safety for residents in the city of Pittsburgh. So I think it's important that deployment of new technology go toward delivery of core services. How are we able to take technology and make our streets safer or more efficient for all users, and maybe not just for the people who are coming up with the technology, developing the technology, or the people who on the private sector who have found a way to monetize it. How is it that we can actually put it towards good use of core services for the city, whether that's autonomous street sweepers, garbage trucks, or delivery devices. I think those types of nuts and bolts services are areas of opportunity.